Hi, in this video for Music 103A, we'll be exploring voice leading by thirds and sixes. And usually what you're going to find in music, and especially in these exercises, are chord progressions down by a third. Now, if you look at, this is page 91 in your textbook, so please go ahead and look at page 91. Let's take a look at these exercises and voice lead them together. You'll see that a chord progression like 6 to 4 is down a third. Now remember, what you want to do is count from 6 down to 4. So you'd go 6, 5, 4, down a third. 4 to 2 is down a third. 2 to 5 is up a fourth. So you just go the smallest distance. So down a third, up a fourth. Now remember, the most common chord progressions, the most common root movements in tonal harmony are, number 1, up a perfect fourth, number 2, down a third, and the third most common, which we'll be talking about in the second part of this video today, up a second. So up a fourth or down a fifth, most common. Second most common, down a third. And third most common, up a second. So these exercises on page 91 are going to combine together chord progressions down a third with those from the last video, which were chord progressions by a fourth or a fifth. Now, when you have chords that are a third apart from one another, like 6 to 4 here in B flat major or 4 to 2, it will always be the case that there are two common tones, two tones in common. And it actually makes for a fairly easy voice leading between chords that are a third apart because there are two tones in common. And you really are just looking to keep the common tones. When you're moving up a fourth, remember, there's one common tone. Later in the video, we'll talk about moving by a second, and we'll see there are no common tones in that kind of chord progression, which makes it the most difficult of root position voice leading. All right, again, the first thing you might want to do here when you're getting used to the process is just simply writing the names of all the notes in the chords. Now remember, we're in B flat major, so there is a B and an E flat in the key signature. So G, B flat, D, E flat, G, B flat, C, E flat, G, and FAC. Now look for the common tones. Now, in chord progressions that are a third apart, you're going to have two common tones. So you can see the G and the B flat are common between 6 and 4. And between 4 and 2, you can see that the E flat and the G are common. And of course, between 2 and 5, there's only one common tone. That's the C. So remember, what you're trying to do here is, number 1, keep common tones when possible. Then move by step if there's not a common tone to be kept. The other alternative, of course, is to make a leap of a third. So third leaps are okay, but do not leap a fourth or greater in these upper parts, in soprano, alto, and tenor. You can leap in the bass, but not in the upper parts. So you don't want to leap a fourth or greater in the soprano, alto, or tenor. Okay, so in the voice leading, you just want to keep as many common tones as possible. So between 6 and 4, we're going to see if we can keep the G and the B flat. Well, the B flat's already been kept by the book here. What if we keep the G? Now remember, what you want to do in root position voice leading is double the root. So you'll see here we have two roots, 1/3, 1/5. In this chord so far, we have root, third, fifth, so we need a second root. So you can see it's a very smooth connection between 6 and 4. You can keep the two common tones and then move this other one by step. Okay, between 4 and 2, the common tones are E flat and G, and you can just go ahead and keep them both, as long as the doubling is preserved. So you can see here we have two roots, 1/3 and 1/5, just like we want. Between 2 and 5, the C is kept as a common tone. Now we have root and fifth. We need another root and a third. Now notice if we move this alto part to the F, then we'll have to leap to the A in this part. So instead of doing that, let's move the G to the A, and then the E flat here to the F. And you can see we have two roots, 1/3, 1/5. Okay, the next one in F sharp minor, we have the chord progression 1 to 6 to 4 to 1. Notice down a third, down a third. 4 to 1 is actually up a fifth or down a fourth, but you'll still have one common tone between 4 and 1 because they're a fourth or a fifth apart. So here are the notes in the chords in F sharp minor. It's going to be D, F sharp, A, B, D, F sharp, and F sharp, A, C sharp. Don't forget to include the appropriate accidentals. All Fs and Cs and Gs are sharp in this key. All right, between 1 and 6, notice the common tones are F sharp and A. We'll see if we can keep them. Now remember, when you're keeping a common tone, that means you're going to keep the same pitch in the same voice. Otherwise, you're not really keeping the common tone, right? So it's keeping the same note in the same voice. So here the alto stays on the F sharp and the tenor stays on the A. Does it work? Well, we have two roots, 1/3, 1/5. So yeah, it works. Now the common tone between 6 and 4, common tones rather, are D and F sharp. The D has already been kept. We can keep the F sharp and the alto. Now we have root, 3rd, 5th. We can move this one by step to the other root. So two roots, 1/3, 1/5. Keeping common tones, moving by step. And then between 4 and 1, you can see that the F sharp is common. And let's see if we can keep it. So here's the F sharp. Let's keep that as a common tone. We have two roots and a fifth, so we do need the third, which we can write by step in the tenor part. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is complete the voice leading for this one as practice. Go ahead and pause the video and come back to the video after you're done voice leading this one for practice, and then we'll check the answer together. All right, so what I've done is already written the names of the notes and all the chords. And let's go ahead and check out the voice leading. Now notice 1 to 3 is up a third. You're still gonna have two common tones. 3 to 6, up a fourth. 6 to 2, up a fourth. 2 to 5, up a fourth. Now this dash means the same chord. So revoice in the same harmony. And then 5 to 1 is up a fourth. So between 1 and 3, we should have two common tones to hold on to. And you can see that they are the B and the D. B is already held on to, and we can hold on to the D in tenor part. We're missing, so right now we have two roots and a third. We're missing the fifth, which we can move the alto to the F sharp. Okay, between 3 and 6, there should be one common tone, and you can see that it's the B. However, the book has not kept the common tone for us, so we're going to have a little bit different voice leading method then. We need an E, because we already have one. We need two E's, we need another E, and a B. Now, if you move this one to the E, you won't be able to move this one to the B without leaping. So let's move this voice to the E and the tenor to the B. And you can see what's resulting here is we have two roots, 1/3, 1/5. Notice if you don't keep the common tone, you're going to have those third leaps and chord progressions that are a fourth apart, like 3 to 6. All right, common tone between 6 and 2 is the E. Let's see if we can keep that. Keep the common tone. We have root, third, fifth, and we need another root by step here. Works out well. Between 2 and 5, it is the A that's common. Now, look at this. We already have one A. So if we keep this A right there, we don't want to have 2 fifths. We want 2 roots. So that's not the way to go. You can see that we have a root and a fifth, so we need another root and a third. Now we have 2 roots, 1/3, 1/5. Now remember, when you're revoicing the same chord, you can leap a fourth, and that's already been done here actually. And remember, the rule that we learned there is, given this note, we could either keep it, we can move it up to the next chord member, or down to the next chord member. Same thing for the F sharp. We could keep it, we could move it up to the A or down to the D. What we really want to do, of course, is to preserve the 2 roots, the 1/3 and the 1/5. You can see that we already have the 2 roots. And of course, if I keep this F sharp and I move this one up to the A, it's not going to work. I wanted to show you why. Several things are a problem. First of all, notice that I made a leap through the F sharp. So you can only keep the D, move to the F sharp, and move down to the A. So that's too big of a leap. Also notice that there is a spacing error here. There's an octave and a third between the tenor and the alto. And there's a voice overlap. The bass here is higher than the previous tenor, or this tenor is lower than the next bass. All right, well, to fix that problem, we're going to want to move this F sharp up to the A and this D up to the F sharp. Notice we have the 2 roots, the 1/3 and the 1/5, and we don't have the spacing error or the voice overlap. Okay, now between 5 and 1, you'll see that the D is common, but the book has not kept the D for us. So that's going to lead us into a little bit different voice leading method. We have a root and a third, so we need another root and a fifth. Now if you move this one to the G, then the tenor will have to leap up to the D, a fourth away, right? So instead of doing that, let's go from the A and the tenor to the G. Remember, that's just simply saying that we're doubling the bass and the tenor in the same pitch, same note head with the stem down and the stem up. And then we can move the F sharp to the D. Now notice it does result in 2/3 leaps going down, but that's better than a fourth leap. And we still have the 2 roots, the 1/3 and the 1/5. All right, I'd like to play these examples for you now that we've voice led them. Here's the first one in B flat major. Number 2 in F sharp minor. Okay, and the last one in G. All right, so far we've looked at revoicing the same chord, and we learned the rules for that, and we learned that revoicing the same harmony really has its own set of guidelines and rules. Then we looked at chords that are moving by a fourth or a fifth apart, and we learned that there's one common tone between those chords. We also looked at chords that are moving a third apart, a third down more commonly, and we noticed that there are two common tones between chords that are moving down by a third. Now we're going to be looking at chords that move up by a second, like 4 going to 5, or 1 to 2, or 5 to 6. Those are all root movements up by a second. You'll need page 94 for this part of the video, and what we're going to look at here specifically are chord progressions that move up by a second. Now, when chords move up by a second, like 4 going to 5, there will be no common tones. And that really does make it the most difficult of all the root position voice leading techniques that we'll look at. In addition, once we start looking at this chord progression, 5 going to 6, we're going to have a special doubling rule. And the rule there is when you move from 5 to 6, double the third of the 6th chord. And we'll look at why that is and do several examples of 5 moving to 6 to show you how that works as well. Okay, so again, this is page 94 in your textbook. And I've written the names of the notes for this first progression already. Don't forget that if you're in a minor key, you need to use the leading tone for the dominant chord. So this is not A, C, E, it's A, C sharp E, right? A, C sharp E. Now in these, they've actually given us the opportunity to write in our own tenor and our own alto to begin. Now my general advice here is that you want to see if you can maintain a little more space between the bass and the tenor and a little less space up in the upper parts. You'll generally, in general, have better luck with that. It mimics the overtone series. The overtone series starts with wide intervals and then gets smaller as you go higher. And a lot of times the voice leading will be better if you follow that guideline. So again, try to maintain more space between bass and tenor, more space down here, and less space up here. So that being said, if you're going to start here, you're really not setting yourself up for success. And you can see already that there is an overlap because the bass is higher than the previous tenor. So instead of that, what if we chose to put the F here and the D here? Now notice how that puts a little more space between the bass and the tenor and a little bit less space in the upper parts. And as I said, that will often result in a better voice leading for you. Not always, but very often. Now remember, you want two roots, 1/3 and 1/5, and you want to preserve that throughout these root position chord progressions, with the only exception being the 5 going to 6. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. Now notice 1 to 4 is up a fourth, so there is one common tone that we can keep, and that's the D. So keep the common tone. We have a root, a third, and a fifth. We need another root, which we can put in the alto. So we kept the common tone and moved by step. 2 roots, 1/3, 1/5. Now notice that between 4 and 5, because they're a second apart, the root movement is up by a second, there are no common tones between 4 and 5. And that does make it a little bit more difficult. Keep in mind, if you move everything in the same direction, you're just going to write all parallels. And you're going to have a parallel fifth and a parallel octave, which you don't want. So this particular chord progression will always result in a third leap. Let me show you why. Notice right now we have 2 A's. We need an E and a C sharp. Now notice if we move this one to the E, it results in a parallel fifth. Right? There's a fifth between the bass and the tenor, moving to a fifth between the bass and the tenor. So that's no good. Also, we have nowhere to write the C sharp without leaping to it. Well, what if we move the D to the C sharp instead? Again, don't forget to mark it in because you're in a minor key. Then we can move the G down to the E. Now notice there is a third leap in the alto part. So you're going to find that third leap in either the tenor or the alto or the soprano, depending on the voicing. anytime you move a chord progression up by a second. All right, this next one is actually down a third and then up a fourth. Now, after a while, you might not need to write the names of the notes in, but for now, go ahead and do that. You can see that between 1 and 6, you're going to have two common tones, the A and the C sharp. They're a third apart. And then between 6 and 2, you're going to have one common tone because they're a fourth apart. All right, now to select the first voicing, you can see we already have two A's. We need an E and a C sharp. Now, of course, if I write the E in the tenor and I write the C sharp in the alto, I'll have a voice cross. So instead, let's go E here and C sharp in the tenor. Remember to start with two roots, 1/3, 1/5. Now between 1 and 6, there are two common tones, the A and the C sharp. The A is kept. Let's keep the C sharp as a common tone. Now we have a root and a third and fifth. We can move the alto to the other root. Two roots, 1/3, 1/5. Okay, between 6 and 2, there's one common tone, and it's the F sharp. Notice we have root, third, fifth. Well, we need another root. We can move the tenor down to the B there. Okay, in this last example on page 94 that we're going to look at, we're in E minor, and the chord progression is 1 to 5 and 5 to 6. Now, there is this special rule that you'll see in your rules of voice leading, and that is typically when we're in root position, we're doubling the root, two roots, 1/3, 1/5. This chord progression is the only exception to that rule in root position. So the exception goes like this. When the chord progression is 5 going to 6 in both either major or minor keys, you want to double the third of the 6th chord. Now there are several reasons for that. The third of the 6th chord is actually scale degree 1. This is C, E, G, right? And the E is scale degree 1. It is also necessary to avoid parallels. And we'll also see that in minor keys, it avoids an augmented second between the leading tone in this chord and the lowered number 6 scale degree in that chord. So there are actually several reasons why you want to double the third when you move from 5 to 6. Okay, again, we need to select a good first voicing of the chord here. You can see we have a root and a third. So we need the 5th and another root. So I'm going to maintain a little more space between my bass and my tenor here as possible. Now between E, G, B and the 5 chord, which is spelled B, D sharp, F sharp, notice that we have one common tone because they are a 4th or a 5th apart. Notice the B is common. So we can hold on to that B common tone. And then we can move the other voice to the D. Now we're in a minor key, so don't forget to mark in the D sharp. Okay, now here comes that special rule that we've been talking about, and that is when you move from 5 to 6, you want to double the third of the 6th chord. And let me show you why that is. Now the 6th chord here is C, E, G. Now notice we have a leading tone in the 5 chord. And the leading tone is going to go up. It's going to go up to the E. Well, the E is one of the thirds. Notice if I were to move the F sharp here in the soprano to the G, I'd have a parallel 5th with the bass part, right? So doubling the E avoids that parallel 5th. Of course, if I move this B to the C, I'll have a parallel octave with the bass here in tenor. So leap down to the G. There's that characteristic leap of a third whenever you have a chord progression up by a second. And notice what happens is that you double the third. So the leading tone goes up, this tone goes down to the E, and this one leaps down to the G. So we have one C, 2/3 the E, and 1/5. Now, also, if you were to move this D sharp to the C in the alto part, notice that D sharp to C is an augmented second, and we're really trying to avoid any augmented or diminished interval. So doubling the third in the sixth chord when you move 5 to 6 really accomplishes a lot of things. It gives you the resolution of the leading tone. It avoids parallels. It also avoids the augmented second between the leading tone and the scale degree 6 in minor keys. And in most musical examples that you'll see from the repertoire, when this chord progression happens in music, you'll see that voice leading. So expect the third doubled when you move from 5 to 6 in the sixth chord. Well, I'm going to give you a couple more examples here of that chord progression of 5 moving to 6. So please go ahead and copy these down. Go ahead and pause the video and copy these two problems down, and we'll go over them in a couple minutes. Okay, the first one here in B flat major, it goes 2, 5, 6. And anytime you see this chord progression, you want to immediately remind yourself, double the third of the sixth chord when you move 5 to 6. That's the only time that you double the third of the 6 is when you move from 5 to 6. So we'll make sure we do that. All right, again, make sure you pick an appropriate voicing. Just want to show you one that doesn't quite work here. Notice here I have 2 G's, and I really want 2 C's, right? So here's the C in the tenor. Okay, now I have 2 roots, 1/3, 1/5. 2 to 5 is up a fourth, so we should be able to keep one common tone. We can keep the C. And notice here we have root, 3rd, 5th, and we can get our other root here in the alto part. Okay, now, because we have this special chord progression of 5 going to 6, we want to make sure that we double the third of the sixth chord. Notice how the leading tone is going up, and it goes up to the third. Now look at this. What if I were to move here and here like that, everything in parallel motion? Do you see the parallel fifths between the bass and the tenor? And the parallel octaves between the bass and the alto. Okay, so to avoid that, we're going to have to go with a little bit different voice leading. To avoid the parallel fifth, move the tenor down to the B flat, and notice what happens. We have 2/3. Then, in order to avoid the parallel octave, we're going to leap down to the D. Again, notice that we have a third leap, and we have 1 root, 2/3, and 1/5. So, when you move from 5 to 6, double the third of the sixth chord. Reminder, you will see that on your rules of voice leading page as well. Okay, one final example for you here of a 5 chord going to 6. Now notice in this chord progression, all the chords are a second up. 4 to 5, 5 to 6. And of course, we want to double the third of the sixth chord here in this chord progression. So B, D, F sharp. 5 is C sharp. Now don't forget you're in a minor key, so it's actually E sharp, G sharp, right? The leading tone in the key of F sharp is E sharp. It's necessary to spell the 5 chord here, right? The leading tone is always the third of the dominant chord. And then this one, of course, is D, F sharp, A. Now, because all the chords are a second up from one another, you will see there are no common tones between them. Okay, let's select a good first voicing. We have a root and we have a third. One possibility would actually be to put the root here and the fifth here, right? We want 2 roots to start off. So I think that looks pretty good. 2 roots, 1/3, 1/5. Okay, and then moving from here to here, again, you're going to expect a third leap between chord progressions that are a second apart like this. Notice we already have the two roots. We can get the E sharp here. We would not want to leap to it in this voice, of course. Okay, and then we can take this one down to the G sharp. Notice that third leap is in the tenor part here. So here we have our two roots, our 1/3 and our 1/5. All right, and remember to double the third when you move from 5 to 6. Again, if we were to move everything in the same direction, notice how you'd have a parallel fifth between the bass and the tenor. If the soprano went up to the D, you'd have parallel octaves between the bass and the soprano. So leading tone resolves. And notice that resolves to one of the thirds. If I move this tone up to the A, I'll have a parallel fifth with the bass. Also, we'll have two A's, and I don't want two A's. And then I need to move, so in order to avoid that, move the tenor down to the F sharp. And notice what results: one root, 2/3, and 1/5. Just a reminder, if you were to move this E sharp to the D, E sharp to D is an augmented second interval, and you don't want to write augmented or diminished intervals in your voice leading. So one root, 2/3, 1/5, in the sixth chord when you go from 5 to 6. All right, and now I'd like to play the examples that we voice led for the moving up by a second. The first one here is in D minor. Notice between 4 and 5, no common tones, and there's a third leap in the alto part. Okay, the second one's in the key of A. This one doesn't have any second movements in it. It goes 1 to 6 to 2. So down a third, up a fourth. And the last one, E minor. Here we do have that 5 to 6 progression, which is also known as a deceptive progression or a deceptive cadence at the end of a phrase. So of course you want to hear 5 to 1, which sounds like this. But instead you're getting 5 to 6. And notice how the scale degree 1 helps give that deceptive sound to the chord progression. Okay, and then the last two that I gave you in addition to the textbook work, here's B flat major. And this one goes 2 to 5 to 6. A lot of times after that you'll hear a 4 chord, which then will go to 5, back to its way to 1. Okay, here's the last one in F sharp minor. So very wide open space for the 4 chord here.